Well, hello, my friends. I am so excited to be here with Janyne Peak Emsick. She is the CEO of YourExecutiveCoach.com. We're here to talk about a really exciting event coming back for its 10th year. Janyne, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you, Andy. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. Um, well, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you, and then we're going to talk about the Professional Women's Connect.
Oh, I'd rather talk about Professional Women Connect, but kind of as an introduction, I've been in Omaha for almost 14 years now
Wow.
and moved here from the Chicago area. And I love helping people through hard places. And that's the bulk of my work as an executive coach. And so I've had an executive coaching practice for a little over 30 years, and it's integrated with organizational change and helping organizations align with vision. And then my husband and I also have a commercial design studio called Emsick Architects, which interestingly, people tend to have a little more interest in an architecture business, and it's a lot of fun to work with my husband on building great buildings. And so those are the two things that I have as formal employment, as well as some teaching. I teach as adjunct at Creighton in their MBA program on change leadership, as well as at a seminary up in Canada called Tyndale on something called the Person of the Leader for a Doctor of Ministry program. And so I keep busy kind of juggling a few of those different hats, and then love some of this community service that we do as an organization.
Yeah. Well, yes, you are really busy. And I know, though, you have made so many wonderful connections, your time here in Omaha and the Professional Women Connect that's coming up here on Tuesday, May 9th. It's been on a little hiatus with the COVID and the pandemic, but it's back. And let's talk about that. And we've got a great speaker. You're going to be interviewing a wonderful woman. So
yeah. So I'm really excited. In fact, Professional Women Connect was teed up it actually had record registration for a March 31st event back in 2020, featuring Christy Johnson, who was with the FBI at the time.
Yeah.
And we were all figuring out what to do. And the FBI was closing everything down, and we closed it down. And then it actually provided this opportunity to pivot and open up a virtual experience. And we had folks attending from around the world, which was really fun.
Wow, yeah.
This is the first time we're back in person, and we've missed our 10th anniversary. So we're going to belatedly celebrate our 10th anniversary, featuring Dr. Joanne Lee, who is the 16th Chancellor of the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And she is just amazing.
Yeah,
her story really is. Yeah, her story, she's a child of parents who escaped communist China and went to Hong Kong, which is fascinating enough because they were entrepreneurs in Hong Kong. But Dr. Lee's story includes being an immigrant to the United States as a student, and just having an amazing career that features her tenacity, her brilliance, and all of that landed her here in Omaha, Nebraska. And so we'll be featuring that story at our belated 10th anniversary on May 9th.
And what inspired you to start this 10 years or 12 years ago? I mean, however long
ago it was.
Yeah.
So it's, for me, it's connected to my own story, because I moved to Omaha back in 2009 to get married for the first time at almost 50. And I knew nobody except for members of my husband's very large family. But I had to put on my big girl pants and figure out how I would get to know the community. And it's an interesting story that I met one woman who happened to be on a golf foursome at a nonprofit event, who knew a bunch of people, and she connected me to people, and they connected me to some folks who said, gosh, I would love to have a way to create an intersection between our two networks. Not my network, I didn't have one. So our two networks, and we got together for coffee, and they each had these great networks. Tammy Moore was the director of the Masters of Organizational Leadership at College of St. Mary at the time. And
Okay.
Diane Stewart, I don't know if you know Diane, she seems to
I
know
know,
everybody.
yes, I do know Diane.
She
Yeah.
knew all of these people. And shoot, I knew I could figure out how to put an event together. I didn't know anybody. And so the three of us said, how can we make this happen? And so literally we compiled their two mailing lists, and College of St. Mary offered to host the space. At that time, we did it at College of St. Mary. And Tammy Murr was our first speaker. And our focus was on how do we help women build social capital. And social capital is this network of relationships that we have. And the research that Tammy, Dr. Moore had done had shown that women aren't as intentional about that. And we thought about how could we inspire people with a story, right? How do we inspire people with the story of a professional woman, and then create an experience that facilitates creating intersections?
Yeah.
And so what's kind of fun for me, and I say this to folks and they're always surprised, is that I don't like networking. And in fact, I usually say I hate networking. And that always surprises people. So what does an almost 50-year-old who is just herself in her business do to meet people when she moves to a new town? And so what I learned about myself is that I'm good with networking if I have a job to do. And so my job became hosting Professional Women Connect. And so I understand how hard it is to go into a room of people I don't know and need help in starting communication, need help in developing relationships with others. And so from that lens, that I brought that into it. The other thing that research showed is that executive women, their preferred way of spending an evening is to get together with some of the women that they know who are also executive women and have a glass of wine and dinner. It isn't to necessarily go into a room of women and meet some strangers. And so the challenge was, how do we bring these two groups together? Because Professional Women Connect attracts around 100 women, 100 to 110, 120, from the C-suite to the front line across industries. So we've been successful in creating a meaningful experience for all of those varied interests. And so it's interesting that the executives who come once, they often keep coming back, and the featured guests keep coming back. And so it tends to be just a wonderful, uplifting, energizing presentation, and then open time of networking for folks who are great at that at the front end, with appetizers and a couple glasses of wine, just to connect with folks that you might have come with.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice segue because you mentioned featured guests. So tell us about some of the women you've had the opportunity to interview over the years.
Oh, we have been so fortunate. So Tammy Murr started it off. Pam Hernandez, who was an executive with Woodman at the time, was next. Sella Quinn, who is she had just won the Entrepreneur Woman of the Year from I think it was from the Chamber at the time, and she just has an amazing story. So Sella Quinn, Big Mama, I don't know if you remember Big Mama, who was featured on the Food Network and was an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, we've lost Big Mama, as well as a couple of other key speakers. Smith Camp, who was the Chief Justice of our U.S. District Court. Deb Gilg, who was the district attorney for us. Susan Courtney, who was with Blue Cross Blue Shield and who navigated, she was a flight navigator with the Navy, took flights 12 hours from the California coast towards Russia, and then had this antenna that went down to a submarine, and then sent the codes to the submarine that would have been to launch a nuclear attack. And then
I missed that one. Wow.
Just to make Mallory Maddox, who went from being a broadcaster in town to being a marketing executive, and she just began as the chief marketing officer with Scooters. So just amazing women who are not just premier leaders in our community, but whose personal stories inspire us.
Yes. And the format of this too, it's very unique because you are up there interviewing. And it's like we're able just to have we're sitting there and it's like we're almost like a fly on the wall, so to speak. And we're able to like just tap into your conversation with whoever you're interviewing, and your questions are brilliant. And you ask questions that often aren't asked because we're learning things about these women that we really don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. And they actually, it's interesting because they'll often say, as we're doing prep ahead of time, I hadn't thought about that. I wonder why, so they actually gain a little bit of insight into themselves. But that whole format of facilitating an interview, and then we have photos that will be featured that represent life stages and often hairstyles and fashion across the ages. That help paint a picture of a person's story. In my executive coaching, I always start in our first conversation with, tell me your story. And I'll say, what were your foundational years like? And they go, going all the way back then. And I really believe we lead out of our story. We learn, the research shows we learn what's good and bad, right and wrong. We learn our motivation, the things we always want to do, the things we never want to do, out of our upbringing. And that drives study in school, how we make choices is how we lead. And so that helps inform others. When we hear someone's story that has been successful, we hear how that connects to our story, and it inspires us to be more intentional in how we lead and how we show up as a team member every day.
Yeah, so true. I'm going to sidebar for a moment. I do remember when you interviewed the mayor, and the photos that were in the background they were so fun to watch. And again, we're learning about this amazing woman and things that we just didn't even, you just don't know. You just don't talk about. So that's
actually kind of a fun backstory, because she had just been elected. Yeah. And it was hard. Normally I go and spend an hour with somebody. I do my research, and then I spend an hour, have them walk through their life story so that I have a little bit of a structure. And then I want them to forget that conversation so that they just show up and have a conversation. And it was hard to get in. Actually, I wasn't able to get in and talk with her before it. So I met with a couple of members of her staff. I'm like, how do I get data on those foundational years? So I called the library from her little small town where she was raised, and there was a librarian who thought this was fantastic. And so she found yearbook pictures and newspaper clippings and all of these things that represented her earliest years. So when the mayor sat down and was ready to kind of give a presentation, I started showing these pictures.
I remember that.
Yep. Arm wrestling. Who's going to, and so we learned she's homecoming queen. I mean, all kinds of things that were very interesting. But what was most important to me coming out of that was, this again was soon after the election, somebody who had supported her opponent and worked hard in support of her opponent came up to me and said, I didn't know all of these things about her, and she deserved to win. She worked her tail off. And so that's part of that universal storytelling, that we can all gain respect for people when we hear where they come from.
Yes. Yes. So, as we wrap up here, tell us a little bit more. Let's talk about the event and the registration, and how people can come, because it's coming. I mean, it's going to be here very soon.
Around the corner. So now is the time. Number one, just go to PWC Omaha, Professional Women Connect Omaha, PWC Omaha, and it'll redirect you to information about the event and a link to register. You can register as your own person. It's at the Scott Center in the Exarban area. So you can register as just yourself, or you can, we have some discounted tickets where if you register with 2 friends, so bring 3 of you, you'll be able to get a discount to come together. And so I just encourage you, check out pwcomaha.com. There's a link there that'll take you to an Eventbrite site where you can purchase your tickets, and bring a couple of friends, a couple of colleagues. If you're a leader in your organization, bring a couple of women who work on your team where you know that they would benefit from establishing relationships with additional women in the community, because we facilitate the event in a way that you will absolutely meet at least 5 other women.
Yeah, it's great. And so are we planning to have more this year?
We're going to do one this year
Okay.
because in the fall, we'll be coming back with our
Oh my gosh,
gratitude.
yes, yes, the Gratitude Summit,
So
which
save the
was,
date. I'll put a little save the date
yeah,
plug in
go
there
for it.
for November 7th, and we will be
Yeah.
doing our executive breakfast in the morning, a midday summit event, and an evening student and young professional event. And we're really excited about the things we're teeing up for this year. So
Yeah.
save the date for that. And we'll be sending that save the date out here shortly as well. So we'll be doing one in the spring, and then you'll see us again next year.
Okay.
I'm not sure who will have as our guest for next year. Maybe some of the folks who are watching this have some ideas of somebody who has an inspiring story.
Well, thank you so much, Janyne, for joining me today. It's always great to see you. I'll see you on the 9th. And
Great.
I hope to see everyone who's watching this on the 9th, May 9th, at the Scott Conference Center for the women's, or for the Professional Women Connect. It's amazing. So you don't want to miss it. So thank
Thank
you.
you. I look forward to seeing you, Andy. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today.
You are welcome. And folks, don't go away. We will be right back.